I yield the floor to Representative Stinson.
I rise in support of HB number 16, Renewing Rainbow Rights. I support this bill because people should not be discriminated because of their sexual orientation, and these children deserve homes. All 50 states in the U.S. made it legal to adopt a same-sex couple. Unfortunately, there are agencies who do not allow same-sex couples to adopt. Less than 1/5 of adoption agencies are actively attempting to recruit LGBT adoptive parents. There are agencies out there that are now allowing same-sex couples to adopt illegally. There are agencies out there that are allowing same-sex couples to adopt, The whole country is allowing LGBT couples to adopt, but agencies are choosing to discriminate against people who are perfectly capable of raising a child. There are over 400,000 kids in foster care right now, and about 20,000 of those kids outgrow the foster care system. That means that 20,000 kids are familyless, and they are more likely to become homeless and unemployed. But agencies choose to believe that LGBT couples are not capable of raising these children. Right now, there are children waiting to find forever families, and until we knock down a barrier to adoption by LGBT people in every state, we are failing them as a nation, said Gabriel Blau, Executive Director of the Family Equality Council. A couple named Philip and Sean wanted to adopt, but they lived in New York, and at the time that was not acceptable. So they decided to move to Georgia, and they adopted a beautiful boy named Zayden. Unfortunately, they were not allowed to adopt Zayden as a couple. Only one of them could adopt Zayden because same-sex couples were not allowed to adopt. So only Philip's name is on Zayden's birth certificate, and now Zayden only has one legal parent. Again, I support HB number 16 because same-sex parents should be able to adopt and children deserve a home. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Lautenbach.
I am speaking on behalf of a fellow colleague in support of HB number 16 because there are thousands of kids who are living in this foster system instead of the safe, loving home they deserve. Nobody should be denied a foster system instead of the safe, Nobody should be denied a child simply because of who they love. A home doesn't become less fit because it was made by 2 moms or 2 dads. A home fit for a child provides love, support, and basic physical needs. Nothing on this list can't be provided by a family exclusively because of who they love or how they identify. I encourage you to vote A for HB number 16 because kids' lives depend on it. I yield my time.
I yield the rest of our time to the speaker.
Debate now moves over to Majority Floor Leader Representative Brickell. Representative Brickell, you have 4 minutes.
I yield the floor to Representative Hooper. I rise in opposition to HB 16. Same-sex and LGBTQ couples are granted adoption rights. Also, to prove that this bill is unnecessary, different sex couples or same-sex couples both can be denied a child as well as different sex couples to raise a child. Also stated by lifelong adoption, same-sex parents in the United States are 4 times more likely to be granted rights in raising an adopted child. According to lifelongadoptions.com, LGBTQ adoption statistics are trending and increasing, but the same-sex parent has become more widely accepted. I oppose HB 16 because not only is passing this bill completely unnecessary, because same-sex couples have just as many rights to adopting a child as different sex couples. HB 16 is wasting time for other bills that matter to be adopted. Thank you for your time. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Mark.
I am speaking in behalf of a fellow representative. I rise in opposition for HB number 16, Renewing Rainbow Rights. This bill proposes to create an appeal system for LGBTQ plus persons to seek trial for the possible discrimination. But why does there need to be a separate court just for the LGBT plus community to deal with this issue? Does this need to be a separate court for, Does this happen often enough to create a whole new system? If and when the LGBTQ plus are discriminated against, and it is proven, HB number 16 wants to turn the adoption center / organization over to federal government. This bill doesn't even go into detail as who would be in charge of caring for these children while their organization is in control by the government. This This bill also claims that children being adopted by straight couples are prone to abuse and ignores the fact that this could happen with the LGBTQ plus couples too. This bill acts as though LGBTQ plus couples can do no wrong. Why do the LGBTQ plus think that they are special enough to have a whole new court system and just given to them? It's hard enough as it is for anyone to adopt a child. It is extremely hard and extremely expensive for everybody. Are the LGBTQ plus oppressed so much that they get to have it easier than everyone else? There is no reason that they can't go through the courts we already have. Is this not enough for them? I'm not saying discrimination doesn't happen, but I oppose HB number 16 because this bill is a waste of $10 million and is completely unnecessary, as it wants to create a whole new system in court when we already have one that works perfectly fine. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Zander.
I'm speaking on behalf of a fellow colleague. I oppose HB number 16, renewing rainbow rights. If this bill passes, many adoption centers could go out of business. Many who are willing to adopt kids in need won't have a place to adopt children. Adoption centers around the U.S. will go out of business. The expenses of this fine are $150,000 for discrimination amongst the adopters. I know discrimination is regular around the world. It won't be able to lessen discrimination. It could increase the discrimination because people of different ethnicities must be treated.
Formal debate time for HB number 16, renewing rainbow rights, has ended. You will now have a 2-minute recess to plan your impromptu speeches. Representatives may now come forward for 12 minutes to respond to the speeches given. Each party will be given 2 3-minute portions. Floor Leader Kinnaman, you will now have 3 minutes.
I yield the floor to Representative Martinez.
A fellow representative mentioned in their speech that many adoption agencies will go out of business due to the fines. But if they are proven in court to be discriminatory against same-sex couples, why would we want those adoption agencies to stay in place? And I may remind you again, in the bill, it states that the government will take over these adoption agencies. So I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Schooneman.
In response to a fellow colleague, I'd like to say that the whole reason we have an appeal court is so that LGBTQ couples don't get to falsely accuse adoption agencies of unfair treatment. I would also like to say that we are not creating a whole new court only for LGBTQ trials. We are refocusing the Department of Health and Human Services. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Engie.
I'm speaking on behalf of a colleague. Why do you believe this is unnecessary when more children could be adopted and placed in a safe home? I yield.
I yield the floor to Representative Foltz.
I'm reading this on behalf of a colleague. You say adoption centers will go out of business, but at least the children will have homes after the government has taken over the agency and has put in place that, or isn't neglecting LGBT plus parents of adopting children. I need my time.
I yield the floor to myself. You said that you want people who have an abortion to just put their child up for adoption. This puts more couples who want to adopt the ability to adopt because if they're unfairly kicked out of the pool because of who they love. I yield the rest of our time to the speaker.
Floor Leader Brickell, your party will now have 3 minutes.
I yield the floor to Representative Bollig.
If someone of the same sex adopts a child, people will also assume they are part of the LGBTQ community, and also the child will have higher rates of depression, suicide, and school bullying. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Sorg.
Private businesses have rights. They can choose who they conduct business with, just like every other business in America. According to a supporting representative, there are still 4/5 of adoption agencies who do not discriminate. That's a lot. There should be no problem with adopting a child.
I yield the floor to Representative Midden.
Same-sex couples can be just as likely to be abusive as anyone else. Though LGBTQ can give more opportunities, they already can adopt. If opposed because of religion, they have that right. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Larson.
Discrimination is always going to happen everywhere, and there's nothing that you can always do to solve that. Legally, adopting with same-sex couples is already legal, so that's just kind of how it is. It's not that we're saying you shouldn't be able to adopt because you're like the same sex or whatever. It's just saying that it's unnecessary and a waste of money, as there's always going to be discrimination.
I yield my remaining time to the speaker.
Floor Leader Kinnaman, you will now have 3 minutes.
I yield the floor to Representative Stinson.
In response to a representative, a child is only bullied if a parent teaches or allows their children to bully a child who has LGBTQ plus parents, and that's just homophobia. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Martinez.
I have a question for a fellow representative that mentioned something about a statistic about child. It was the first impromptu speech. I would just like to know where your statistic comes from. And second, another colleague mentioned that 4/5 of adoption agencies don't discriminate. There are currently 3,000 adoption agencies. 1/5 of that is 600 adoption agencies. That is still a very substantial amount. Even anything below that would still be substantial. We don't want any discrimination at all. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Schooneman.
Our bill is only changing the way that LGBTQ couples are handled in the adoption system. We are not saying that it's going to make discrimination go away, just to hopefully lessen the effects of it. I yield my time.
I yield the remaining time to the speaker.
Floor Leader Brickell, your party will now have 3 minutes.
I yield the floor to Representative Bollig.
If one adoption agency discriminates, just go to the next one. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Sorg.
Out of the 3,000 some agencies you mentioned, how can you not find one? I yield my time.
I yield my remaining time to the speaker.
Are there any motions to extend debate time? The time for impromptu speeches has expired. It is now time for an optional closing speech by the bill sponsors, and then we will begin voting. Representative Schooneman, do you wish to give a closing speech? At this time, please, if you haven't done so already, open up the Google form for voting on HB number 16, Renewing Rainbow Rights. You have 90 seconds to submit your votes. I ask that you remain quiet during this period. Please close your Chromebook and put it away after you have submitted your vote. You have 90 seconds to vote. HB number 16, Renewing Rainbow Rights, fails with 49 responses in opposition and 39 votes in support. We will now have a 5-minute recess. The next bill we will consider is AB number 13, Fair Sports Act. A state bill to regulate which sport a transgender athlete may participate in is now open for discussion. Representatives Bills and Dregney, you have 5 minutes to present your introductory remarks.
The 21st century has been a goldmine of the progressive and fairness, but women's sports are being endangered by transgender athletes. Transgender athletes are stealing opportunities away from women's right to fair competition. Women have fought long enough to have equal rights, including the right to fairness in sports, which should not be taken away from them.
Transgender women have a physical advantage over biological women, with things like higher bone density, body mass, and better blood flow. Just a few things among many which they have high advantages in. All these things are things that can't be diminished by hormone therapy, which in multiple states and schools is currently the only requirement to compete on a men's team. Even after hormone therapy and testosterone reduction therapy, transgender women continue to outperform biological women. Even after 2 years of treatment, trans women still ran 12% faster. This is very unfair for all the women who have worked hard for their whole lives, just for someone from a different gender to steal their dreams from them.
Experts all around the world have agreed that transgender women are exponentially stronger and faster than women. Alison Heather, a physiologist at the University of Otago in New Zealand, stated that some advantages such as bigger bone structure, greater lung capacity, skeletal muscle strength, and larger heart size remain after hormone therapy. She continued to say that testosterone also promotes muscle memory and ability to regain muscle mass after a period of detraining by increasing the number of nuclei in muscles, and these added nuclei don't go away. So transgender women have a heightened ability to build strength even after transition.
Women athletes are being pushed aside and having their success stolen from them. 2 males who competed as females in Connecticut have amassed 15 women's track championship titles. These titles were held by 9 different girls in 2016. These two males hold 17 all-time individual women's meet records in Connecticut. The result of these men competing as women has taken away scholarships and recognition of biological women trying to compete against them.
At the 55-meter indoor track competition in the 2019 state championship, Chelsea Mitchell was the fastest runner among biological women, finishing with a time of 7.23 seconds, but she finished in third place. In second place was a biological man with a time of 7 seconds, and in first place, with the new women's state champion, another biological man with a time of 6.95 seconds. With that time, that runner would have gotten 140th place in the men's state championship. 140th. Chelsea is one of many females whose success have been pushed aside by someone of a different biological gender. Women have been fighting for equal rights and fairness for over a century. Taking away fairness of women's sports is just reversing all of the hard work that achieved that. In the name of progressiveness, women's sports are suffering, and women are becoming oppressed and discriminated against once again.
HB 13 is controversial, but to achieve true fairness, HB 13 must be implemented in order to protect women's sports. If the minority of transgender athletes try to achieve fairness than biological women, the majority of these athletes are negatively affected and their fairness is taken away. HB 13 will ensure fairness among all women's sports across the nation.
Thank you, representatives, for your introductory speech. AB number 13, Fair Sports Act, will have a total of 4 minutes per party per debate. Discussion will begin on the Republican side. For Leader Brickell, you'll have the floor for 4 minutes.
I yield the floor to Representative Larson.
I rise in support of AB number 13, the Fair Sports Act. This bill states that transgender athletes should only be able to participate in their biological sport. I agree with this bill because it will create fairness to all women athletes especially. It is researched that naturally men have 40% more upper body strength and 30% more lower body strength than women. When generally speaking, men are typically bigger and stronger than women. With that, if the sport consists of a lot of collision or contact, danger is also a concern with the physical differences listed, as well as many more. Allowing transgender athletes to participate in the sport of their preferred gender creates the same equality if a person weighed 200 pounds was allowed to wrestle someone at 100 pounds. Clearly, there's a large disadvantage. Think about if you were in that unfair position. Therefore, I strongly encourage you to bring equality for all women athletes by voting in support of AB number 13, the Fair Sports Act. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Plisky.
I'm speaking on behalf of a fellow representative. I'm in support of Bill AB number 13. The Fair Sports Act is easily justified by scientific research. According to MountSinai.org, the average male has 3,000 to 1,000 nanograms per deciliter of testosterone, whereas females have only 15 to 70 nanograms per deciliter of testosterone. Now, you may be wondering what importance this chemical justifies. Testosterone is literally a steroid. You may hear people speaking about athletes going on steroids to enhance their performance levels, but as you can see, males are already at an insane advantage. This clearly justifies how unfair it would be for a female born a male to compete in a female sport, figuring their biology automatically puts them at a deranged advantage. There are multiple transgender athletes who broke records that prior were unimaginably difficult. According to the Washington Post, Mary Gregory, a transgender woman, undoubtedly beat the competition and won. It should not have been this easy for her to win. Her competition should have been a competition. This is not fair. I strongly urge you to pass AB number 13 and make sports fair again. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Brodnick.
AB number 13 is a bill that will enforce the segregation of males and females with their biological birth and demonstrate that in sporting events. All men are created equal. That is a statement that has been known throughout the United States for hundreds of years, and that is true. Men should be able to equally compete against other men. The previous statement, however, does not necessarily apply for women. Men and women differentiate internally with lung capacity, bone structure, hormones, and many other attributes that impact performance. Professional athletes who have trained their whole lives should not be punished with something out of their control. That applies for both men and women. I rise in support of AB number 13, and you should too.
I yield my remaining time to the speaker.
Debate now moves over to Minority Floor Leader Representative Kinnaman. Representative Kinnaman, you have 4 minutes.
I yield the floor to Representative Martinez.
I rise in opposition of AB 13 Fair Sports Act. This bill is not only going against what this bill title is claiming to do, but this is just a blatant attack on trans rights. This bill targets transgender individuals for the sole purpose of being trans. The people taking advantage of the system are people who deserve to be taken out of these sports. But all this bill does is target trans sports players. This bill claims to be creating equality between people, but this is just making trans people compete with the wrong teams. If it is clear that our current system is outdated, instead of putting new rules and regulations, why are we just putting regulations on trans people? If this is that big of a problem with hormones and physical advantages, why are we putting restrictions on trans people? According to the U.S. National Library of Medicine, National Institutes of Health, it says that currently there are no direct or consistent research suggesting that transgender female individuals or male individuals have an athletic advantage at any stage of their transition, for example, cross-sex hormones or gender-affirming surgery, and therefore, competitive sports policies that place restrictions on transgender people need to be considered and potentially revised. After all this, I urge you to not vote for AB 13, this Fair Sports Act. I'll ask again. This bill claims to be the Fair Sports Act, but is it actually fair to everyone? I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Breinig.
I'm speaking on behalf of a fellow representative. I rise in opposition of HB number 13, Fair Sports Act. Somebody's gender may be determined from birth, but it may or may not change later in life depending on the person. Claiming fair sports is futile if the quest to get there is to discriminate against the transgender community. This bill is a clear attack on the transgender community and is focused on kicking people out rather than unifying them. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Bafardi.
I speak on behalf of a fellow colleague. I rise in opposition of HB 13 Fair Sports Act. I oppose this bill because I believe that children and teens should be allowed to compete with the gender they identify with. If a transgender athlete already went through all the trouble to become who they are, why shouldn't they be allowed to do what they love? Being transgender is already hard enough for some people to deal with. Schools shouldn't be allowed to stop them from trying to fit in with the gender they identify with. Shane Diamond is a transgender man who played women's hockey for most of his life and transitioning period. He says, I am living proof that there is no better lifeline for trans kids than ensuring that they are able to play sports with their peers. We owe it to kids, transgender and cisgender alike, to make sure that they have the same opportunities to participate in, fall in love with, and be saved by sports the way so many of us have. His experience, along with many others, are all living proof that transgender athletes should be allowed to participate in the sport they choose, just like the rest of the boys and girls in their schools. Again, I rise in opposition of HB 13 because transgender women are still women and should be treated the same. I yield my time.
I yield the rest of our time to the speaker.
Formal debate time for AB number 13, Fair Sports Act, has ended. You will now have 2-minute recess to plan your impromptu speeches. Representatives may now come forward for 12 minutes to respond to the speeches given. Each party will be given 2 3-minute portions. Floor Leader Brickle, you will now have 3 minutes.
I yield the floor to Representative Sword.
This bill is not a matter of how it makes someone feel. It's the facts and about equality in the competition. In the women's 55 meter state indoor track in 2019, the first place man would have got 140th place in the men's track division. He finished 0.31 seconds faster than the nearest biological woman.
I yield the floor to Representative Bowick.
We're just trying to ensure fairness in women's sports, not like targeting gender people. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Shulman.
As far as I know, trans women aren't women. They have the genetic makeup of a man. They just choose to identify as a woman. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Mast.
Laurel Hubbard is a 43-year-old weightlifter, trans female, that will now be competing in the Olympics because she broke all the records. And if that doesn't make you mad, then I don't know.
I yield the floor to Representative Mitten.
According to USAToday.com, President Joe Biden signed an executive order which threatened to pull federal funding from schools unless they allow trans women to compete on girls' sports teams. This isn't fair because genders born with their original parts should be on the same team that they have their makeup. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Larson.
Sports are meant to be a competition. People can be who they are, but in sports there's no point with the large disadvantage in participating.
I yield the floor to Representative Bills.
According to the facts that we pointed out, there's an obvious advantage, and that's one that shouldn't be ignored. In women's sports, we can either choose to be fair or we can choose to be inclusive, and neither of those go hand in hand.
I yield my remaining time to the Speaker.
Floor Leader Kinnaman, your party will now have 3 minutes.
I yield the floor to Representative Nelson.
This bill does not solve the problem. The bill speech talked about how hormone therapy only partially works to change trans women's body structure, but it still partially works. So if you want transgender people to compete with their original gender, what about transgender men competing with women? If they go through hormone therapy, then they still have a body structure closer to males than all the other women. This bill defeats its own purpose. It's useless. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Schooneman.
Similar to what my colleague said, I'd like to point out that your alleged solution creates the same problem you are trying to solve. By placing biological women who transitioned into men with biological women, the transgender men will still have higher levels of testosterone and outperform the biological women. I'm not dismissing your opinion, but your solution will not help the situation you are trying to solve. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Martinez.
I just have a few questions for the bill sponsors. It was mentioned like one of the factors being like the corresponding parts to an individual. I just want to know where that puts intersex people in this because I'm just confused. I also have another question of where did you get your 12% faster statistic that I believe it was trans men that are faster than cisgender women? And I just want to comment on the fact that a lot of the people talking about this bill creating fairness for women talked about going against the abortion bill, and I just want to know what happened to women, supporting women. This was also mentioned by other colleagues. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Foltz.
In today's society, sports are obviously a massive part of what we see in the media and as well in schools. And for someone who is transitioning, it is very important for them to have to transition socially as well, and that means engaging in different activities that are for their preferred gender. And as well as Doreen Coleman stated that we have to ask, is it more important to respect gender identity or to see female bodies on a podium? I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Engie.
I'm speaking on behalf of a colleague. I'm responding to another representative. Your fact on wrestling is untrue. Wrestling is based on weight class, not gender, so it would rarely ever be the case that where someone 100 pounds would wrestle a 200-pounder.
I yield the floor to myself. People don't go through hormone therapy on a whim. It's really expensive, and there's a lot of obstacles in the way for you to go through hormone therapy. And trans women don't go through hormone therapy just to compete with other women. They go through hormone therapy because they know and they want their bodies to change, and it's not because it's not theirs.
Floor Leader Brickell, you will now have 3 minutes.
I yield the floor to Representative Sorg.
Facts don't care about your feelings. If you look in the enacting clause of our bill, it clearly states that trans women who are trans men have the same problems. They will not undergo hormone therapy as a trans man. Also, your only comeback is attacking other topics. Please stay on topic.
I yield the floor to Representative Mitten.
Going off what a colleague said, preferring social activity for their gender defeats the purpose of the whole bill because a certain sport shouldn't be just for a certain gender, which kind of defeats this whole purpose. And let's say if a man were to identify as a woman and go on the football team, or not the football team, like a dance team or something, it completely defeats the purpose because they would win over women. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Kipley.
Speaking on behalf of a representative and responding to a fellow representative, we are putting restrictions on transgender athletes because it is not equal competition, and that's what you guys want is equality. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Vills.
Responding to some other representatives, if you actually read our bill, you'd realize that biological women can only compete in women's sports if they have not and will not undergo hormone treatment. So this bill is not contradicting itself, as you say.
I yield the floor to Representative Rios.
So you're telling me if I told Shaq to throw on a wig, he wouldn't average 70 points per game in the WNBA?
I yield the floor to Representative Mass.
Some of the people speaking in opposition to this bill don't play sports, so I don't see how that.
I yield the floor to the Speaker.
Floor Leader Kinnaman, your party will now have 3 minutes.
I yield the floor to Representative Martinez.
I'm speaking on behalf of a representative. Many representatives during this debate have continuously called transgender women men and used he, him pronouns for trans women. This is discriminatory and transphobic for a bill talking about trans issues, and I think if you were writing a bill about trans issues, you'd understand how to use the right words and grammar. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Schuneman.
In response to a fellow colleague, I'd just like to point out that throwing on a wig is not the same thing as identifying as a different gender. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Craig.
I'm reading this for a colleague. As a female athlete, if you feel threatened by other athletes, maybe you should work harder. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to myself. Someone on the opposition said that a lot of us speaking in opposition of this bill aren't athletes. A lot of you speaking for this bill aren't trans. I yield the floor to Representative Martinez.
I ask again what your statistics are for statistics mentioned in your speech and throughout this debate. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Nelson.
I would just like to ask what makes you so sure that transgender men will not go through hormone therapy at all? I yield my time.
I yield the remaining time to the Speaker.
Are there any motions to extend debate time? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Debate time will be extended by 6 minutes. Representative Brickell, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
I would also like to remind everyone, when someone else is talking, please do not be talking. It's very rude and annoying.
I yield the floor to Representative Kent.
In response to a fellow colleague stating that a woman should try harder, it's physically impossible to have the same testosterone levels, meaning you can't compete at the same level. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Mitten.
As a fellow ally to LGBTQ, I would just like to say that it's not about talking about LGBTQ and talking about how they are a woman if they identify as it. It's just the fact that in a sports area, that if you were born with male genitalia, then automatically you have more testosterone and therefore are stronger, which makes it unfair towards both sides. I yield my time.
I yield my remaining time to the speaker.
Floor Leader Kinnaman, your party will now have 3 minutes.
I yield the floor to Representative Martinez.
It has been mentioned many times at this point. I want to know where intersex people stand in this, because anatomy, there's no mentions of them at all, and that's a giant demographic of people that we are ignoring. I yield my time. If you do not know what that is, please educate yourself and figure that out. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Lautenbach.
Speaking on behalf of many of the female athletes over here, nobody has had an encounter with a transgender athlete. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Schuneman.
I'd just like to point out that if someone feels the need to identify as a different gender, most likely they are not going to be very happy about having to go back into their biological gender, and most people will not wait to get their hormone therapy just so that they can join the sports league that you want them to join. I yield my time.
I yield the remaining time to the speaker.
Are there any motions to extend debate time? The time for impromptu speeches has expired. It is now time for an optional closing speech by the bill sponsors, and then we'll begin voting. Representative Bills and Dreckney, do you wish to give a closing speech? At this time, please, if you haven't done so already, open up the Google form and voting on HB number 13, Fair Sports Act. You have 90 seconds to submit your votes. I ask that you remain quiet during this period. Please close your Chromebooks and put it away after you have submitted your vote. You have 90 seconds to vote. HB number 13, Fair Sports Act, passes with We will now have a 5-minute recess. Just a reminder, if you're in the gallery, please do not talk. Thank you. And if you're in the class, don't talk either. The next bill we will consider is HB number 11, No Money for the Druggies. A federal bill to mandate drug testing for welfare recipients is now open for discussion. Representatives Brodnicki and Galvan, you have 5 minutes to present your introductory remarks.
Welfare is defined as an aid in the form of money or other necessities for those in need. If a welfare recipient receives money from the government, that money is meant to help the recipient pay for their bills and keep themselves healthy. The money distributed to welfare recipients should not be used towards non-necessities such as tobacco products, alcohol, and recreational non-prescription drugs. Sadly, many welfare recipients are making poor choices with the use of their welfare checks to pay for unhealthy and unnecessary items like drugs, alcohol, and tobacco products. Studies have shown that 10% of welfare recipients have substance abuse problems. HB 11, No Money for the Druggies, will mandate welfare drug testing for all welfare recipients in the United States. There will be a 1% federal tax on all tobacco and alcohol products to pay for the drug tests. Drug testing is mandated for the workforce. It will enforce the law that welfare recipients must have no drugs in their system. And it will ensure the taxpayers' money is being used towards something beneficial, not drug and alcohol use. Welfare checks should not be given to those in dire need of assistance to support their families, not with someone who wants to pop pills or snort some coke. Drug testing welfare recipients will save welfare money and stop drug use. 10% of welfare recipients are using drugs and still receiving money. And those 10% of people could not receive their welfare checks and would save $43.28 billion. This was done in Michigan, and 10% tested positive for drugs and 3% for hard drugs like cocaine.
Too many children are suffering. Careless mothers and fathers are spending money on drugs and alcohol instead of food, clothing, shelter, and many more necessities. Too many people are being irresponsible and irrational with their money and not caring about their own poor children. Imagine you're a 12-year-old child, the oldest of 3. Your mom has taken a turn for the worst and becomes a chain smoker. You're trying your best to help, but you can't. Your mom goes out once a day and drops at most $40 a day on a pack of cigarettes, adding up to $280 a week and $1,120 per month. You can't do anything about it but suffer and starve in silence and try to comfort your younger siblings. HB number 11 is a bill that will drug test all people receiving welfare. This bill aims to slow the use of drugs and helps give people a better chance at a healthy, positive life. They don't feel the money's being used right when they don't know that drugs are being used in the house. And I would concur with that, Kasha Kelly said. Kids that are raised in a household where drugs are present are more likely to grow up with an addiction. Some will be introduced to substance use disorders in their home later in life. The knowledge that their parents are involved in what they perceive to be bad activities, Holly Holloway said. They don't feel the money's being used. Oh. Yeah, that's it.
America is all about giving people second chances. With HB 11, those in the impoverished class will be given that second chance and will be done correctly. The welfare program will finally be organized, and all tax-paying citizens of the United States will know exactly where their money is going and how it is being spent. Hundreds of thousands of lives will be saved, and the U.S. will become a cleaner and safer country. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, representatives, for your introductory speech. HB number 11, No Money for the Druggies, will have a total of 4 minutes per party for debate. Discussion will begin on the Republican side. Floor Leader Brickell, you have the floor for 4 minutes.
I yield the floor to Representative Saladas.
I rise in support of HB number 11, No Money for the Druggies. HB number 11 needs to be passed because people's hard-earned money should not be going to feed people's bad habits. According to theconversation.com, a newspaper written by academic experts and researchers, 1 in 5 people on welfare have used drugs in the previous year. making drug use 50% more common for welfare recipients than it is for the general public. Federal welfare programs were the largest budget in 2011, costing approximately $1.3 trillion, said budget.senate.gov. That means that 22% of government money is spent on providing welfare. That is more than goes into hospital and roads combined. HB number 11 would not only save money, but it would also make sure our money is being used for the good of the people. So if you want your tax dollars going to the right place, vote in favor of HB number 11. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Mast.
I'll be speaking on one of my former colleagues. I rise in support of HB 11, no money for druggies. I believe that if people are receiving money from the government, that money should not go towards drugs, but instead uses for food, shelter, and other necessities. Drug abuse leads to increased rates of homelessness and unemployment, which is the very problem welfare is trying to solve in the first place. In addition, drug-related accidents accounted for 52% of all traffic-related fatalities, according to the University of Pennsylvania. This doesn't affect low-income households, but it does affect them more than higher-class Americans, which this bill will help end. Some may say that the people receiving welfare should be able to do what they want with their money. However, I argue that people shouldn't be spending their money on things that hurt their health, hurt society, and hurt other people. So I encourage you to vote in support of HB 11, no money for druggies. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Buffardi.
I speak on behalf of a fellow colleague. I rise in support of HB 11, no money for the druggies. This bill should pass because we shouldn't have to waste people's hard-earned money that they have to give away to taxes just to give it to people who are going to abuse it and buy drugs or alcohol with it. Some people get regularly drug tested at their jobs, so welfare recipients should get drug tested too because we're the ones paying for it. According to drugtestcity.com, Utah spent $30,000 in 2013 on their drug tests for welfare programs. 262 of the people did not meet the testing requirements. Governor Brad Wilson then stated that denying the benefits to those people alone saved the state $350,000. That was just in Utah. Imagine how much money we could save if all states did this. This bill would help so many people get the help they need with their drug or alcohol abuse problems and would overall save the government a lot of money and help the people in our country. I yield my time.
I yield my remaining time to the speaker.
Debate now moves over to Minority Floor Leader Representative Kinnaman. Representative Kinnaman, you have 4 minutes.
I yield the floor to Representative Nurkilo.
I am speaking on behalf of a fellow colleague. I rise in opposition to HB 11, no money for the druggies. Drug testing welfare recipients is simply unconstitutional. It violates the Fourth Amendment and the right that protects people from unreasonable searches and seizures by the government. This was proven in the Machawanski versus Howard case when the U.S. Court of Appeals ruled the law was unconstitutional and was not designed to address the public safety. And since this, many more laws on welfare drug testing have been struck down. Not only is it unconstitutional, but taking away welfare money from someone struggling with an addiction can be detrimental, especially if they are already seeking help and these benefits are stripped away. Drug addiction is a serious illness. Drugs obstruct the way a person's brain works and disrupt the way neurons communicate with one another. Many recipients that receive welfare suffer from underlying mental and social disorders, and that is why they result into drugs in the first place. Rather than drug testing to take away the government's funding from addicts, we should seek them out to help relieve the addiction. Taking away something that is necessary to them or their family could worsen the addiction. In addition, the American Public Health Association, the National Association of Social Workers, and the National Association of Alcoholism and Drug Abuse Counselors all oppose drug testing in welfare recipients. Thank you for listening. I advise all you to vote nay on HB 11, no money for the druggies. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to myself, and I read this on behalf of a colleague. I rise in opposition of HB number 11, no money for the druggies. Drug testing is expensive. That's just a fact. We can't be spending money on drug testing while people need our help. It's true that around 10% of all welfare recipients have issues with drug abuse, but it is far more expensive to test than just to give them the money, and the difference between welfare recipients and the rest of the population is considered insignificant. After all, a drug test was done before Michigan policy was halted, and only 3% had tested for hard drugs. According to the ACLU, science and medical experts strongly oppose drug testing. Drug testing is also opposed by the American Public Health Association, National Association of Alcoholism and Drug Abuse Counselors, American College of obstetricians, and gynecologists, National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence, Association of Maternal and Child Health Programs, National Health Law Project, National Association on Alcohol, Drugs and Disability Incorporated, National Advocates for Pregnant Women, National Black Women's Health Project, Legal Action Center, National Welfare Rights Union, Youth Law Center, Juvenile Law Center, and National Coalition for Child Protection Reform. Judge Victoria Roberts ruled that testing welfare recipients could be used for testing the parents of all children who receive Medicaid, state emergency relief, educational grants, or loans for public education. We could be using this money for so much more. The cost of drug testing is so impractical that I can't list the number of things we could be spending the money on in this speech. It's impractical and a waste of taxpayers' money to drug test welfare recipients. Again, I strongly encourage you to vote in opposition of HB number 11, no money for the druggies, so that people can have their health care and we can spend our taxpayers' money wisely. Thank you. I yield the floor to Representative Schneibel.
I speak on behalf of a fellow representative. Drug testing welfare recipients would result in a negative stigma around the concept of being poor, but also will cost a lot of money to pay for a simple drug test. By creating a program that requires all recipients of welfare to be drug tested, it would construct a negative assumption that would add shame and guilt to people who are already struggling to provide for their loved ones. The U.S. state program screened 9 different states, and with the total population, there were only 0.19% returned positive tests. In society, there is a very common assumption that those who are on welfare recipients are automatically stereotyped as a druggie. It has been stated that just because...
Formal debate time for HB number 11, no money for the druggies, has ended. You will now have a 2-minute recess to plan your impromptu speeches. Representatives may now come forward for 12 minutes to respond to the speeches given. Each party will be given 2 3-minute portions. Floor Leader Brickle, you will now have 3 minutes.
I yield the floor to Representative Boeg.
Drug testing is often required by employers, so it should be required for welfare recipients as well. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Sorg.
In response to a representative about those who have mental problems, how they seek drugs to help. If they need medication, do it the legal way and get a prescription.
I yield the floor to Representative Boeg.
This bill ultimately wants to get drugs off the streets, so it's okay if we pay a little extra money to get those drugs off the streets. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Hooper.
How would you feel if you gave a homeless person $100 for them to buy food, clothes, or other necessities like a motel room for the night? Then he or she went and spent it on alcohol or drugs. Well, That is what's happening with today's welfare checks. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Midden.
According to PEBMed.ncbi, drug use is 50% more common in households with welfare recipients. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Plisky.
Our taxpayers' money would be being saved as this bill makes sure it goes towards the proper use, instead of going towards drugs. People using drugs while on welfare would lose their check, saving the taxpayers' money. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Sander.
In response to a representative, HigherRight.com states that it's only $30 per drug test per person.
I yield the floor to Representative Larson.
So you guys think that taking away money from the people struggling with drugs is a bad thing? Do you want them to keep suffering? No, because this bill is not excluding rehab programs. If they are tested with drugs, that's still an option which would benefit them much more than giving them the money to keep struggling with drugs. I yield my time.
I yield my remaining time to the Speaker.
Floor Leader Kinnaman, your party will have 3 minutes.
I yield the floor to Representative Schneibel.
In society, there is a very common assumption that those who are welfare recipients are automatically stereotyped as a druggie. It has been stated that just because someone or families are on welfare does not mean that they're involved in drugs. In general, drug testing welfare recipients would result in a huge loss in money, not only for the government, but for all recipients in welfare. It was discovered that 5 different states collectively spent more than $1 million on drug tests, and there were very few people who were abusing the welfare system. Overall, testing welfare recipients is not the best option and will lead to a negative result in society. It is not fair to drug test those who are struggling to support their family and their well-being. All in all, I strongly advise you to vote against HB 11, drug testing welfare recipients.
I yield the floor to Representative Stinson.
I would like to talk about Section 4, Number 3. It states that if a welfare recipient does not take the drug test within 7 days of being notified about the test will be classified as positive and the welfare recipient will receive the same penalties as a positive drug test, which is, the recipient will not receive the welfare check within the following month. Not all people who get welfare checks will have transportation to get to a hospital, which is where the drug tests will take place in. So I'd like to know what other options you would have for those recipients. Also, I'd like to talk about the speech that you gave when you said that children who grow up in a household that use drugs will become addicts. That is not true. My siblings and I were actually in a household with our biological parents who lived in a household of drug abuse, and none of us have addiction. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Martinez.
I just want to remind people that welfare is a lot more than just a check from the government. That this can come in many different forms, such as what we know sometimes as food stamps and many other different ways. I also want to bring up the point that if there's a clear correlation between low-income individuals that abuse drugs, why aren't we taking the money that would be taken away from them? Why don't we put that into rehabilitation, or just take that money and take the money that they would be receiving and put that directly into rehabilitation for them, instead of taking it away so they get no money whatsoever? I yield my time.
I yield the floor to myself, and in response to another colleague, they said that this would save money because it's taking away welfare checks from people who use drugs. This doesn't save money because it's taking the welfare that those people would have received and is putting it back into more drug tests. I yield our remaining time to the Speaker.
Floor Leader Brickell, your party will now have 3 minutes.
I yield the floor to Representative Sorg.
In response to a representative about states that lose money due to a test, please state your sources and please use facts. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Midden.
According to theconversation.com, 1 in 5 people in welfare use drugs. Out of 2,541 people, 301 of those recipients are using their money for drugs. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Nelson.
Overall, this bill could kind of encourage rehabilitation by adding an extra punishment for doing drugs, and by performing regular tests, so it's regular check-ins and regular segments where they have to be off of drugs, and taking away money. That's kind of like a wake-up call for people that are addicted that need to get help. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Grodnick.
I just want to say that, like, if you do get drug tested and you're on welfare, like, it's like a responsibility or like a right to get that money because, like, for example, I have a job that I get randomly drug tested for, like, at least once a month, and, like, that's my responsibility to make sure I test positive, otherwise I'll lose my job. So if I test positive, I lose my job. If I test negative, I get to keep my job. So I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Phils.
Drugs are bad. So drugs are causing people to die, and parents who use drugs are creating unsafe situations for the children. This bill will only help children to not have to witness their parents overdose or die. And this bill will also help children and parents live in safer homes.
I yield the floor to Representative Greason.
This bill is really just to help people stay off of drugs, and the 1% tax on drugs and alcohol will help stop people from keep buying drugs, and it will help pay for the bill.
I yield the floor to Representative Kent.
As stated prior, this gives individuals a check-in, and so that they're holding responsibility to try and get back into the real world and work on gaining a better stability in their economic advancements. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Middle.
As a fellow colleague said, I would just like to agree that it is their responsibility, and if they do want that welfare check, then it's their responsibility to test negative, and going to get drug tested is important to get their money that they apparently need. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to the Speaker.
Floor Leader Kinnaman, your party will now have 3 minutes.
I yield the floor to myself. In response to a fellow representative, your employer can drug test you because it's a private company and they can decide who works there. I yield the floor to Representative Martinez.
As previously stated by a colleague, working somewhere is a private institution. Recipients of welfare won't have that choice because recipients of welfare have to be shown that they are looking for jobs and looking for work. So they don't really have a choice of whether or not to receive this money. They get it because they are very obviously struggling. Also, responding to another colleague, stopping the money that recipients are receiving will not stop their addictions or drug use. It will only prevent them from having more money. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to myself, and I read this on behalf of another colleague. Like a fellow recipient said before, welfare money comes in many forms. Welfare programs such as SNAP or food stamps can only be used for specific items. You can't even purchase paper towels through these programs. You would not be able to buy illegal drugs. I yield the rest of our time to the Speaker.
Are there any motions to extend debate time? The time for impromptu speeches has expired. It is now time for an optional closing speech by the bill sponsors, and then we will begin voting. Representatives Brodnicki, Galvan, and McNary, do you wish to give a closing speech? At this time, please, if you haven't done so already, open up the Google form for voting on HB number 11, No Money for the Druggies. You have 90 seconds to submit your votes. I ask that you remain quiet during this period. Please close your Chromebook and put it away after you have submitted your vote. You have 90 seconds to vote. HB number 11, no money for the druggies, passes with 70 votes yes and 21 votes no. We will now have a 3-minute recess. The next bill we will consider is AB number 21, Death with Dignity, a state bill to allow physicians to administer lethal medication to the terminally ill in order to end their life upon personal request, is now open for discussion. Representative Schneibel and Gage, you have 5 minutes to present your introductory remarks.
Can we wait like a minute to get everybody in? Decorum, please. I understand people are still coming back, but please be quiet.
You wake up bright and early for your follow-up visit with your doctor after your biopsy the week before. The sun is shining, the birds are chirping, and you have a good feeling about the results. You're called into the examining room, and your doctor informs you of them. You've been diagnosed with terminal cancer. You're told your cancer will kill you within the next 6 months. Your perspective on life shifts. Fatigue, trouble breathing, nausea and vomiting, bowel obstruction, delirium, anxiety, and depression. A few of the many agonizing symptoms you as a dying person are forced to experience. Life is filled with sorrow. You don't want to live any longer. You look into your two options, ending treatment and starving yourself. Both are painful. This is what life is like for a terminally ill person. 1.4 million Americans are suffering through this exact experience, and although end-of-life care is key to supporting dying patients, aid in dying is still not legalized in Wisconsin. Death with dignity, also known as aid in dying, is a painless option for terminally ill patients to end their life using physician-prescribed lethal medication. By passing AB 21, you're legalizing this choice. 74% of Americans and 60% of physicians support death with dignity. Terminally ill patients who pass the extensive amount of requirements should have the option of passing painlessly on their own terms. The greatest human freedom is to live and die according to your own beliefs. As an American, you have the natural freedoms of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. According to the Cambridge Dictionary, the word liberty means the freedom to live as you wish or go where you want. If liberty is stated in the United States Declaration of Independence, then your right to live as you wish shouldn't be taken away. In this case, liberation would come from dying. If someone is living with a detrimental terminal illness and they wish to end their life and not live in agony any longer, the right thing to do is show compassion for that person. A common misconception is that aid in dying is suicide, and at first glance, this may look true. Someone is asking to end their life and planning to do so. However, committing suicide is not peaceful. The person is all alone and is typically dealing with intense, heightened emotions. Death with dignity is so very different. The ill person who is deemed capable of making healthcare decisions wants to live but has already had the decision made for them by their deadly illness. Death with dignity gives them a sense of hope, a way to die peacefully on their own circumstances, not controlled by their illness. The dying patient is able to spend their last hours doing things they love with the people they love. And the patient is able to back out of taking the medication at any time. They're in control. Although the physician must prescribe the lethal medication, they do not administer it. The patient does it themselves with a physician in the room. Again, they are in charge and will never be forced to do so. In the case that someone is forced by a physician to take the medication, the physician will face extreme consequences. The punishments include, but aren't limited to, termination from workplace and of license, and conviction of first-degree manslaughter or premeditated murder. Oregon, the first state to ever have a death with dignity law dating back to 1997, has never had a physician unlawfully administer lethal medication. In order for palliative care to be compassionate and empathetic, death with dignity should be possible. Michelle Edberg is one of the many people who shows their advocacy for death with dignity through her daughter's story. Michelle quotes, "Someday I or somebody I know or care about might need death with dignity. It would be a gift and a relief for people who do not want to die, but who are dying. They and all of us deserve dignity at the end." On August 25, 2018, Christine, her daughter, died peacefully at home, finally free of the pain and suffering she had endured for nearly 6 years. As I reflect on her life and her final crusade to access and advocate for death with dignity, I realize I felt very strongly that everybody should have this end-of-life option, should they find themselves facing a detrimental illness like Christine. And like Michelle said, one day someone you may know close in your heart might need death with dignity. This bill could make an impact on so many people's lives, and whilst not many people actually choose death with dignity, the option should not be taken for granted. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Representative, for your introductory speech. AB number 21, Death with Dignity, will have a total of 4 minutes per party for debate. Discussion will begin on the Democratic side. Floor Leader Kinnaman, you have the floor for 4 minutes.
I yield the floor to Representative Baffardi.
I rise in support of HB 21, Death with Dignity. This bill should pass because there are so many people and families that know or are the person that are diagnosed with a terminal illness. According to the CDC, In 2019, 1,115 children younger than 15-year-olds died of cancer. 9,084 adolescents and young adults between 15 and 30 died of cancer, and 928 adults between 40 and 64 died of cancer as well. 462 adults were 65 years old or older and died of cancer. These people had to suffer just to know they weren't going to make it in the end. This bill could help others like them not go through that. Imagine you get diagnosed with a terminal illness and you have only 1 year to live. 1 year to live, but 6 months into that, your condition gets so much worse and you're stuck in the hospital all the time. You initially did the requirements to qualify for death with dignity, and now you decide that it is your time. You can gather all your friends and family to say goodbye one last time, and then you leave. Those around you no longer have to watch your suffering, and most importantly, you don't have to be the one in pain anymore. If this bill were to pass, all the people that are struggling with their illness wouldn't have to, and it is totally their choice. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Hooper.
I rise in support of AB 21. I agree with the amended bill AB 21 because my family and I have been through this situation a few times before. My grandfather and great-grandfather both had cancer. Both had a certain time left to live on this earth. Every day they spent here waiting for God to take the pain away. However, with death with dignity, they could have picked a lot less painful and suffering for themselves and for the people around them. I truly hate to see anyone, young, old, black, white, male, or female, and especially animals, suffer through any type of pain. Death with dignity would definitely help a critical ill person or family cope. While going through this part of their life, I fully support AB 21, death with dignity, because this bill is a 100% choice. Thank you. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Mitten.
Good morning. Could you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The National Honor Society is selling $1 turkey rounds all week during ASU lunches in the area for delivery next week. DSA will not be this afternoon. Please come next week for our Thanksgiving send-off party. Sauk Prairie High School will be hosting the ASVAB on December 2nd at 8 a.m. The ASVAB is a vocational test used by the armed forces to determine which job or jobs would be best for you. If you're interested in joining the armed forces or have already enlisted or are unsure of your vocational strength, this test is for you. Students who wish to sign up for the ASVAB must sign up in advance. You may sign up via the form that was emailed to you or by stopping at student services prior to December 2nd. The ASVAB is open to students in grades 10 to 12. Any questions or concerns, please see Ms. Hines. A few dates to mark on your calendar. November 18th, picture retake in the morning only. These will be held in the Erie Stadium. Thank you for your attention. Have a great day.
We yield our remaining time to the speaker.
Debate now moves over to Majority Floor Leader Representative Brickell. Representative Brickell, you have 4 minutes.
I yield the floor to Representative Haas.
I rise in opposition to AB number 21, death with dignity. Imagine being in your living room receiving a call that your father, who is supposed to pass away 9 months from now, has taken a pill to end his life. AB number 21 could make this a reality. When terminally ill patients are given the opportunity to put out of their misery, they will take that opportunity without thinking of the pain they will cause family members. Suicide in any form is bad, morally and whatever else other form there is, if you are not terminally ill, or if you are terminally ill. So I urge everyone to vote against this.
I yield the floor to Representative Levers.
I'm reading this for a fellow colleague. I rise in opposition of AB 21, Death with Dignity. I originally liked this bill and the idea of it. When this bill was amended, they changed the guideline to a patient cannot be terminally ill if they are 12 months away from dying. So the amendment goes against the bill. If I was a parent and my child was dying, and I think they could last a few more years or try more treatment options, a lot of things could change in 12 months. It's not reasonable to allow assisted suicide at that time. There are a million things you could experience in that time. You could spend time with your family or cross things off your bucket list. I agree with the idea of the bill, but not the amendments.
I yield the floor to Representative Lautenbach.
I am speaking for a fellow colleague in opposition of AB number 21, because a lot can change in a year. This bill states that a person with 12 months left to live will have the choice to end their life through medically assisted suicide, 6 months before they are considered terminal. This bill allows a person with twice the terminal amount of life left to make a life-altering decision for not only themselves, but the people around them. In the 6 months this person is actually terminal, their condition could drastically improve or a new treatment could be developed. Why should we allow a person with so much potential, so much life ahead of them, to give up before they are even terminal? I strongly urge you to vote against AB number 21, because quite frankly, it's unethical to let this happen to a person with so much potential for life. I yield my time.
I yield my remaining time to the speaker.
Formal debate time for AB number 21, Death with Dignity, has ended. You will now have a 2-minute recess to plan your impromptu speeches. Representatives may now come forward for 12 minutes to respond to the speeches given. Each party will be given 2 3-minute portions. Floor Leader Kinnaman, you will now have the floor for 3 minutes.
I yield the floor to Representative Mitten.
I rise in support for number 21, Death with Dignity. This bill needs to be passed because those who have been suffering should get the choice to end their life if they choose to. According to stories on deathwithdignity.com, a story of a man named Robin Toole had been terminally ill with cancer. His wife told his story. His story states, with his energetic, vibrant man was stricken by mysterious symptoms, he fought hard to find answers. His doctors were stumped, and while they searched for a remedy for over 2.5 years, in the meantime, the pain and suffering were taking their toll on Don. By the end, he was unfortunately suffering unrelenting pain, had difficulty eating and speaking, experienced partial deafness, and became very weak. He wrote me a note confessing that he had never experienced such terror. Then tubation was removed after 24 hours, and he went home with the gastric tube inserted for feeding. His body was racked with pain and swelling. He had difficulty breathing, and he felt constant fear. The hope that he had held onto for years was now dashed by his new reality and lost for anonymity. Having no ability in Arizona to receive medical assistance in death, Don took it upon himself to end his own suffering with a single gunshot. His death shouldn't have been a violent one. This man who gave so much to others should have been given a compassionate option at the end of his life. I am blessed to have been married to this wonderful man. His life's mission and values were an example to me and many others. Individuals who are suffering should not have to choose a violent way to end their life, to end their pain and suffering. There should be a much safer and easier way. And that's why I think the bill, HB number 21, Death with Dignity, should be passed. Thank you. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Stinson.
In response to a representative, if you don't want your child to end their suffering between the 6 to 12 months, you are in control. It states that consent from a legal guardian is required. Just remember to consider your children's feelings before yours. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Engie.
I'm speaking on behalf of a colleague. In response to a fellow colleague, wouldn't you be in more pain watching your family member suffer for a long time compared to a quick and painless death? I yield my time.
Sorry, I yield the floor to Representative Hooper.
Once again, AB 21 is 100% optional. No one is telling you that you can't cross things off your bucket list. Also, no one is telling you that you have to end your life. Furthermore, there are so many opportunities to opt out of doing this if you decide to do it. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Rios.
A fellow representative talked about how if you received a call talking about a family member doing this, it shouldn't really affect them because it really isn't their place to have an opinion about someone's choice and wanting to do it.
Floor Leader Brickell, your party will now have 3 minutes.
I yield the floor to Representative Bowick.
I'm just saying, like, life is amazing. Like, you should go, like, see the world and all that. And, like, you shouldn't take your own life. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Nelson.
Well, I do generally support this bill. I would like to point out that in 2014, about 1.3 million patients received hospice care, and 13% survived. So some of these people that would be taking this lethal dose, could have another chance at surviving and recovering, and they don't know if they have that chance. So yeah, I don't know. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Sword.
If they're given 6 months to live, it doesn't mean that they're going to die in 6 months. It could be the fact that they can live longer than that, and you never know. You never know if your illness is going to turn to good. You never know. I yield my time.
I yield my remaining time to the speaker.
Floor Leader Kinnaman, you will now have 3 minutes.
I yield the floor to Representative Martinez.
As many representatives have mentioned, patients can often live longer than time estimated. That's why you can change whether you want to proceed with the procedure or stop. That's the whole point of the bill. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Greason.
As one of my fellow colleagues stated, you can go out on your own time whenever you want, so you don't have to sign it and then go the next day. You can wait 10 months, you can wait 6 months. Also, in response to another fellow colleague, if you do, you can do this with whoever, whenever, wherever you want, and it can be on your terms, and it can be with you want. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Fultz.
Yes, family and friends are definitely affected by whether it's a close person's death or family's death. It's ultimately up to the person because they're the one that is living with this on a daily basis. They are the ones suffering the consequence from this illness. And it was not their fault to even contract this illness. So they should be able to deal with this in a way that they have decided. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Mitten.
If you're terminally ill and you're going through these things, most likely they're going to end their life either way. So wouldn't you want them to have a safer way to end their life other than starving themselves or a gunshot? I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Baffardi.
A fellow representative said that they should go out and live their life while they have it, but some people are bedridden while they have their terminal illness, so they can't even do that. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Martinez.
I'm reading this on the behalf of another representative. Saying that people have potential to live a long life seems irrelevant when talking about someone that has a terminal illness or a terminal diagnosis. I yield my time.
I yield the remaining time to the speaker.
Floor Leader Brickell, your party will now have 3 minutes.
I yield my remaining time to the speaker.
Are there any motions to extend debate time? The time for impromptu speeches has expired. It is now time for an optional closing speech by the bill sponsors, and then we will begin voting. Representative Schneibel, do you wish to give a closing speech? At this time, please, if you haven't done so already, open up the Google form for voting on AB number 19, Death with Dignity. You have 90 seconds to submit your votes. I ask that you remain quiet during this period. Please close your Chromebook and put it away after you have submitted your vote. You will have 90 seconds to vote. AB number 21, Death with Dignity, passes with 61 votes yes and 27 votes no. The next bill we will consider is AB number 17, 45-minute lunches. A state bill to extend school lunches to 45 minutes is now open for discussion. Representatives Braun, Lautenbach, and Enge, you have 5 minutes to present your introductory remarks.
If you had ever had to cram in your lunch at school, then AB 17 is for you. AB 17 will ensure that public schools in Wisconsin will give a minimum of 45-minute lunches for both students and teachers. Lunches statewide in Wisconsin are required to have a minimum of a 20-minute eating period for kids to get the nourishment that they need. By the time children get their things put down and get their lunch, it leaves them with about 15 minutes to eat. This system could result in malnourishment, eating disorders, and children not getting the digestion time and nutrition that they need in order to be successful. This issue is important because if these times do not change, bad eating habits and eating disorders could continue to form in children at a young age, not setting them up for a successful future. AB 17 will be a step in the right direction for a healthier society.
Nutrition plays a big role in our bill. A study was done by the School Nutrition Association where they took data for 20 days, 10 days at each school, to determine the amount of food consumed and wasted in 2 elementary schools. School 1 had a 30-minute lunch period, while School 2 had 20-minute lunch periods. The results showed that when kids had a longer lunchtime, they consumed significantly more food and nutrients. The unwanted food decreased from 43.5% to 27.2%. A second survey was done by the same people, and between 10 schools, 44% of lunch staff said the kids didn't have enough time to eat lunch. In 2017, many parents called Bahoa High School very angry when they found out that their kids only had 15 minutes to eat. KHON2 news station talked to a UH professor who stated a 15-minute lunch has the potential to build unhealthy eating habits. Parents are worried for their children, and the schools seem unfazed.
In other countries like France, students have lunches up to 2 hours long, and many students achieve more and are more focused in classes. Most students have to try and get in the lunch line first so they will actually have enough time to eat. The CDC says that longer lunches can help students get more key nutrients. As you can see, short lunches can lead to unhealthy eating habits, poor nutrition, and malnourishment. It is our duty to relieve the harm and stress of students and teachers having to scarf down their food at lunch. We can achieve this by ensuring a minimum of 45-minute lunches for all public schools in Wisconsin. Thanks.
Thank you, representatives, for your introductory speech. AB number 17, 45-minute lunches will have a total of 4 minutes per party for debate. Discussion will begin on the Democratic side. Floor Leader Kinnaman, you will have the floor for 4 minutes.
I yield the floor to Representative Breinig.
AB number 17 should undoubtedly be supported. Kids need to have this extra time to take a mental break throughout the day. These extra 15 minutes can help students' mental as well as physical health. As stated in the bill, not having enough time to eat can cause disorders such as anorexia. In America, there are currently more than 30 million people with anorexia, according to eatingrecoverycenter.com. Now, this may seem like an absurd number. However, when kids feel rushed, they may not eat. By not eating, this may start an unhealthy, repetitive pattern. When thinking less critically, no kid could possibly oppose this bill because lunch is the best part of the day. Kids say this because the school is extremely long and stressful. That current period of time is like a breath of fresh air, and if we had longer lunch, we could regain our tranquility and carry on as well as focus on eating. I cannot see any opposition for this bill under any standards. I urge you to vote yes for AB number 17.
I yield the floor to Representative Mark.
I rise in sport. I rise through glory and allow AB number 17 45-minute lunches to be passed due to their nutritional value on students and teachers. Many students have no breakfast, lunch, and dinner because of their families may not have enough money or may not have enough time to eat. I feel bad for the students who get rushed with 30 minutes of lunch not being able to process all the food in time, especially students who don't get the proper nutrients. Students need nutrients to be able to grow a brain and everything. Without food, many students can't get sleep, energy, and health. Teachers need 45 minutes to set their work aside to eat food and catch up with others. Teachers who work every second of the day will ruin their mental stability, and that means the students will have a rough day. Teachers are as important as students' lunches because education is important in everyone's life. In conclusion, AB number 17, 45-minute lunches should be made a bill for kids to develop and learn more. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Schneibel.
I speak on behalf of a fellow colleague. I rise in support of Bill AB 17, 45-minute lunches. Anyone who has ever been in our school lunchroom knows that students have to stand in line for forever to get their lunches, and then have to hurry to eat them before they go to class. This is not beneficial for their health and actually impacts how they learn later in the day. According to the Public School Review that states, recently the USDA set new nutrition standards on food that is served in public schools. As a response to the Healthy, Hunger-Free Kids Act of 2010, those standards will include more fresh produce and whole grains, fat-free milk, and salad bars. However, experts say that more nutritious food also takes more time to eat, which means kids may be served fresher, healthier fare without sufficient lunch breaks to enjoy their meals. We need our students to be healthy and happy in order to best learn. It is for this reason that I rise in support of AB 15, 45-minute lunch.
We yield our remaining time to the speaker.
Debate now moves over to Majority Floor Leader Representative Brickle. Representative Brickle, you have 4 minutes.
I yield the floor to Representative Bowick.
I rise in opposition of AB 17 45-minute lunches. According to Livestrong.org, a longer school day would actually increase the amount of time in school for some areas. This would further lead to less time after school for physical activity, which could make some students unhealthy. The longer school day would actually burn out students. Vote nay for AB 17 because it would be a waste of time.
I yield my remaining time to the speaker.
Formal debate time for AB number 17, 45-minute lunches has ended. You will now have a 2-minute recess to plan your impromptu speeches. Representatives may now come forward for 6 minutes to respond to the speeches given. Each party will be given one 3-minute portion. Floor Leader Kinnaman, you will now have 3 minutes for impromptu speeches.
I yield the floor to myself. A fellow representative said that it would increase the school day, but if there's already a minimum requirement of 20 minutes for lunch, this would only add a maximum of 25 minutes to the school day. I yield the remaining time to the speaker.
Floor Leader Brickell, your party will now have 3 minutes.
I yield my remaining time to the speaker.
The time for impromptu speeches has expired. It is now time for an optional closing speech by the bill sponsors, and then we will begin voting. Representatives Braun, Lautenbach, and Enge, do you wish to give a closing speech? At this time, please, if you haven't done so already, open up the Google form for voting on AB number 17, 45-minute lunches. You have 90 seconds to submit your votes. I ask that you remain quiet during this period. Please close your Chromebook and put it away after you have submitted your vote. You have 90 seconds to vote.
Decorum, please.
AB number 17, 45-minute lunches passes with 82 votes yes and 7 votes no. The next bill we will consider is AB number 15, More Sleep, Less Homework, a state bill to require a 1-hour mandatory study hall for all high schools in the state of Wisconsin, is now open for discussion. Representatives Kolnick and Stinson, you have 5 minutes to present your introductory remarks.
Oh, good. Okay. My Chromebook's not working, so thank God she's here. Okay. Okay. I'm going to be honest, I'm not that prepared, so bear with me. Students are not getting enough sleep today. That's just a fact. We all know it. The average teen gets about 7 hours of sleep while they need about 9. Most of this cause comes from school. Who's surprised? The average high school spends about 3 hours on homework every single night, with the majority of us juniors getting the most, with about 4 hours of homework per night. If teens had more time during the school day to do their homework, they could get more sleep, which would result in better test scores. Think about how much sleep you get on a nightly basis. Compare that to the amount of time professionals recommend. Who here is getting enough sleep? I bet nobody. Okay. Anywho, if you're getting on about 9 to 10 hours of sleep, you're getting the right amount. The amount of homework given to students is a major contributing factor. This is why teenagers are not getting enough sleep. As a result of staying up late to complete their daily tasks, such as homework, students lose precious hours of sleep. According to the Nationwide Children's Hospital, teenagers need between 9 and 9.5 hours of sleep. Poor sleep can make it much more difficult with every relatively minor stress. Everything becomes much more problematic when you're tired. Daily hassles can turn into major sources of frustration, which can lead to stress and anxiety. You might find yourself feeling frazzled, short-tempered, and frustrated. Poor sleep itself can turn anything into a source of stress.
In January 2018, a student in Newport Harbor Public High School, California, committed suicide. Despite being apparently happy and successful, he left multiple notes behind after the incident, telling his parents and coaches not to blame themselves. He blames the school system and describes how he couldn't take the pressure and the amount of work that was considered normal at the school. Segment from one of the letters. One slip-up makes a kid feel like the smallest person in the world. You are looked at as a loser if you don't go to college or if you get a certain GPA or test score. All anyone talks about is how great they are or how great their kid is, he wrote. It's all about how great I am. It's never about the other kid. The kid who maybe does not play a sport, have a 4.0 GPA, but displays great character. He says his public high school felt like a private school. So much pressure is placed on the students to do well that I couldn't do it anymore. The amount of homework is taking a huge toll on a student's mental and physical health. Students are stressed and some just can't take it anymore. A teacher named Ronnie lost his student from suicide his 3rd year of teaching. He decided to follow one student around school and he found that he had no time for himself. By the end of the day, I was exhausted, he said. I barely had time to pee or eat. The Journal of Experimental Education did research on a number of one stressor of students and how it affected them. The researchers asked students whether they experienced physical symptoms of stress, such as headaches, exhaustion, sleep deprivation, weight loss, and stomach problems. More than 80% of the students reported having one or less stress-related symptom in the past month. And 44% said they had experienced 3 or more symptoms.
To summarize, high school students are not getting enough sleep. Please pass this bill to allow us all to get enough time for our homework, which allow us all to get better sleep. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, representatives, for your introductory speech. AB number 15, More Sleep, Less Homework, will have a total of 4 minutes per party for debate. Discussion will begin on the Democratic side. Floor Leader Kinnaman, you have the floor for 4 minutes.
I yield the floor to Representative Mark.
I rise in support for AB number 15, More Sleep, Less Homework. Allowing kids to have a mandatory study hall will increase their sleeping schedule and let students have time for themselves and family members. Being able to hang out with your family and friends after school will help grow student morale. Encouraging students to love school more through this mandatory study hall. Some kids will use this time to spend more time with friends if they can't hang out after because of work or family strictness or location. Allowing this bill to pass will allow kids to sleep because decreasing the 57% of teenagers that say they don't get enough sleep will jump up to 77%. However, when it comes to teens growing into young adults, they won't have enough time to be teens if they were cooped up in their rooms doing homework day in, day out. Families will prosper more, parents will thank schools for allowing their kids to have more time for themselves. In conclusion, students will be happier with this bill passing. I end my time.
I yield the floor to myself, and I read this on behalf of a fellow colleague. As a student, I have a hard time maintaining a decent sleep schedule just like any other student you might talk to. An average person is supposed to get at least 8 hours of sleep, but studies show that the average amount of time is around 6 hours of sleep. So how can this be changed? This bill provides an answer to that question. This bill has schools provide a mandatory study hall so that students who want to sleep can, and students who want to show up early can do that as well. Any other way to avoid this problem, less sleep, is giving students less homework. Here's some evidence to back up my claim. The combination of late bedtimes and early school start times results in most adolescents not getting enough sleep. In recent years, evidence has accumulated that later school start times for adolescents result in students getting enough sleep. School officials can learn more about the research connecting sleep and school start times. School districts can support adequate sleep among students by implementing delayed school start times as recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Medical Association, and the American Academy of Sleep Medicine. All in all, a mandatory study hall and less homework would benefit students in a big way. I yield the floor to Representative Martinez.
I rise in support of HB 15, more sleep, less homework. This bill is important because students shouldn't have to get less sleep because they're too busy with homework. The mandatory study hall introduced by this bill will allow students to be able to work on their homework at school rather than having to do it later, which could potentially cut into sleep. According to the CDC, 72% of students in grades 9 through 12 are not getting enough sleep, as mentioned in the speech. According to the Sleep Foundation, sleep deprivation can result in slowed thinking, reduced attention span, weakened memory, bad decision making, lack of stress, or lack of energy, stress, anxiety, and irritability. These symptoms all negatively affect students' abilities to learn in schools. Allowing students time to do homework in school will result in more sleep, therefore also allowing students to do better in schools. I urge you to vote in favor of HB 15, more sleep, less homework. I yield my time.
I yield the remaining time to the speaker.
Debate now moves over to Majority Floor Leader Representative Brickle. Representative Brickle, you have 4 minutes.
I yield the floor to Representative Mark.
I am speaking on behalf of a fellow colleague. Students are expected to wake up before 8 a.m., go to school for 8 hours of the day, take tests a few times a week, and finish all the homework given to them every day of the week and the weekend. As stated in the bill, the average teenager should get at least 8 to 10 hours of sleep per every 24-hour period. And Around 57% of teenagers said that they don't get enough sleep, and 67% of them said that they get about 5 to 7 hours a night. These statistics are shocking and should be fixed to help out students with their growth, both physically and academically, and mental health. Again, I support AB number 15 because students should be healthy, both mentally and physically. Thank you. I yield my time.
I yield my remaining time to the speaker.
Formal debate time for AB number 15, more sleep, less homework, has ended. You will now have a 2-minute recess to plan your impromptu speeches. Representatives may now come forward for 3 minutes to respond to the speeches given. Each party will be given one 90-second portion. Floor Leader Kinnaman, you will now have 90 seconds.
I yield the floor to Representative Engie.
I would like to point out that 2 of my fellow colleagues are asleep right now, so that shows that we could use this. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Mitten.
If preschoolers can have nap time, I think that high schoolers have just the same amount of a right. I yield my time.
We yield the remaining time to the speaker.
I yield the floor to Representative Brickle.
I yield the floor to Representative Bills.
Sleep is for the weak. I yield my time.
I yield the floor to Representative Nolden.
Homework is for the weak.
I yield my remaining time to the speaker.
The time for impromptu speeches has expired. It is now time for an optional closing speech by the bill sponsors, and then we will begin voting. Representatives Kolnick and Engie, or not Engie, Stinson, do you wish to give a closing speech? At this time, please, if you haven't done so already, open up the Google form for voting on AB number 15, more sleep, less homework. You have 90 seconds to submit your votes. I ask that you remain quiet during this period. Please close your Chromebook and put it away. After you have submitted your vote, you'll have 90 seconds to vote. number 15, more sleep, less homework, passes with 76 votes yes and 12 votes no. There will now be a 5-minute recess. I yield the floor to President Barsness.
All right, at first I'd just like to congratulate and say good job to everyone who did get up and speech and argue today. And yesterday it was very nice. And just before I start, even if I veto or pass the bill, I would like you to stay respectful and do not clap for when I veto a bill, please. So, the first bill I will be starting with is HB number 12, voter ID. I believe that having a photo ID will be beneficial and fair, and for people who do not have a photo ID and really want to vote, will go out and get one. Therefore, I am passing photo ID. The next bill I will be talking about is what's this one? The plastic one? What's that called? I'm sorry.
What goes in the ocean goes in you.
What goes in the ocean goes in you. HB number 10. I believe that a straight ban would not be a good idea. We could just get money from the government, like you were saying, to make recyclable easy and safe, instead of banning corporations from using plastics and many people losing their jobs. Therefore, I am vetoing HB 10. The next bill I will be talking about is HB 22, increase police funding. The fact that many racial problems that came up in the last few years came up in the debates is kind of saddening, like George Floyd and many others. I believe that this bill was not pointing out those problems in the police department. I believe that this bill will help improve police training and get them more equipment to be safe, and hopefully that it will prevent events like the George Floyd murder be stopped. Therefore, I am passing HB number 22. Nope, not veto. The next bill I will be considering is AB number 19, organ opt-out. I like this bill a lot. It'll make it easier for everyone trying to get their license, and if you don't like it, you can opt out. It's in the name. And I feel like it will help increase organ donors in the future. Therefore, I am passing AB number 19, organ opt-out. The next bill I will be talking about is AB number 14, Save the Bees. I believe that making farmers change their product will not, one, make it harder for them to produce their products, and it will be more expensive for more fancy products, even though I've talked with all the farmers that bees are not the #1 pollination that help their plants. Therefore, I am vetoing AB 14, Save the Bees. The next bill I will be talking about is HB number 9, flat taxes. I do not believe this bill will do any good because I was not given enough evidence as I was listening. Therefore, I am vetoing HB number 9, flat taxes. The next bill I will be talking about is HB number 13, the Fair Sports Act. I believe that transgender people, women and men, should be allowed to play in sports that have a weight class, wrestling, football. But when it comes to sports that do not have a weight class, I believe that it is unfair and unsafe that a biological man that identifies as a woman plays with other women. I feel like that is unfair and unsafe. Therefore, I am vetoing HB number 13. Wait, no, I am passing, sorry. I am passing HB number 13, the Fair Sports Act. The next bill I will be talking about is HB number 11, No Money for the Druggies. I believe if you take money away from the drug addicts, the welfare money, it will not stop them from being addicted to that drug. Therefore, I believe you should give the money to them no matter what, and they should deal with the consequences that being addicted to drugs can lead. Therefore, I am vetoing this bill. The next bill I will be talking about is AB number 21, Death with Dignity Legalization. I believe that the patient, and if the family has come to terms with death, I believe that it should be no other choice but the patient and the families. Therefore, I am passing AB 21, Death with Dignity Legalization. The next bill I will be talking about is AB 17, 45-minute lunches. I don't believe extra time will help kids eat healthier. I believe the extra time will help kids sit at Senex longer, talk with their buddies, and eat more pizza at Senex. I do not believe that longer times will change kids' minds to eat healthier. Therefore, I am vetoing AB 17, 45-minute lunches. And the final bill I'll be talking about is HB/AB number 15, More Sleep, Less Homework. I am for this bill, but in my opinion, what's the point of getting less homework and having a mandatory study hall? If you get less homework, I believe that you should not need a mandatory study hall because you'll have less homework. And let's be honest, besides kids that are in AP classes or have a lot of core classes are up all night doing homework. Yes, I know a lot of you go home and do homework, but when you're done, how many of you stay up and watch YouTube, Netflix, play video games? Exactly. I am for this bill, and I am passing it, but that's my opinion on it. I believe that's it.
Thank you, Mr. President.
And therefore, this is my last time being president. I am stepping down.
I yield the floor to Mr. Brager, Mr. Musak.
Thank you. It's a good thing you're stepping down, because with that many vetoes, you probably wouldn't have got reelected. Yeah, it would not be good. All right. So, American government students, we have a few things we want to talk about, because the process is not over. So, first off, we just want to say good job. We know it's a long 2 days. We know that it can be tiring being here. That you're listening a lot, you're talking a lot, and it's wearing on the brain. So good job. Thank you for participating. It was good to have our full session back together for the first time in 2 years. We want to just have you think about where we came from. We started with hundreds of ideas at the beginning of legislative semester. Hundreds. From that, you, with a partner, chose about 50 or 60 different topics that you created bill pitches out of. From those bill pitches, 23 bills were created. 15 of them were amended and passed, or possibly amended and passed in your committee. 13 of them were chosen by Speaker Ballweg to be debated in full session. We actually debated all 13 of those. You passed 11 of the 13. That's the most bills we've ever passed in a full session by far. Of the 13, President Barsness signed 6 into law and vetoed 5 of them. So out of those hundreds of ideas, we come out with 6 signed bills, which we'll be looking at tomorrow is actually a pretty high percentage for the amount of bills that a Congress passes. However, in the real world, this process is not even close to being done. And Musak is going to talk a little bit about that.
So, in the real world, while you're debating these bills over here, there'd be another chamber next door talking about the exact same bills and debating those exact same bills in the Senate, whether it be here in Wisconsin, Madison, where our Assembly and Senate is, or in Washington, D.C., with our House and our Senate. The hardest part about that is that that other chamber may pass that bill, or they may fail that bill, and that bill stops there. They also might pass a different version of the bill. So let's say we look at HB 12 where a bill is signed into law. There might be an HB 12 that you guys passed and an HB 12 that the Senate passed. Then we have to come back together with a few representatives and a few senators, make a brand new version of the bill that has all the parts of it in there, and then re-debate the thing all over again and try and pass it again before it goes to the president for being signed and vetoed. And so all that stuff is happening alongside the same debate we'd be doing here. So obviously there's a lot more kind of going into that legislative process that we can recreate here. We kind of showed a unicameral style of Congress, whereas in real life we have a bicameral style, which if I make AP Gov work third term, we may try to do that, we'll see. Anyway, have them be your Senate. Plus now, we have the opportunity with the 5 bills that we vetoed, you as the House and Congress have the chance to revive those bills if you want to. You could decide to overturn that president's veto and possibly still make that bill a law with a 2/3 vote.
Which we will be looking into probably tomorrow or the next day. You will have an opportunity as a legislature, we'll probably vote via Google form, to overturn President Barsness's vetoes. You need a 2/3 supermajority to do that. Some of the bills that we voted on and passed already have that, but you still need to vote because sometimes people change their mind. In fact, we've had that happen before where it originally had 2/3 of a vote, it was vetoed, and then they didn't reach that 2/3 to overturn the presidential.
Have we ever overturned a veto?
I think maybe once or twice, not very often.
And it's something in real life that does not happen very often. I believe the first veto overturn was like 1860, I think. So it took like almost 100 years for it to happen. And it's something that is, I mean, it's there. It's part of that checks and balance we talked about. For some of these bills here, President Barsness is acting as that check and balance, saying, hey, I don't think this bill is going to be beneficial for everybody. So I'm going to make sure that it doesn't become a law. And you have the chance to overturn that presidential veto and make sure that is something you really want to happen. So looking at those 5 bills that President Barsness vetoed, you can kind of start thinking your arguments as to if we should overturn that veto or uphold that veto and not make it a law, I guess.
So this process that we took you through was a multi-month-long process, from those first ideas to the 5-6 bills that were signed into law. That's still not nearly as difficult as it is in real life. We were debating 1-page bills versus in real life, hundreds, thousands of pages.
Some of these bills are brought in on a dolly cart because they're so heavy and hard to read. Like they are literally this tall from the floor if you print every single thing of them out. It's crazy with like 500 and 600 amendments. I think my class looked at one, possibly 500 or 600 amendments to these different bills that are out there.
You also debated 13 bills over 2 days and 7 hours. They would debate 1 bill for 12+ hour days over a period of months. It just takes that much longer. So when you think about the frustration, the process, multiply that by 100 or more, and you'll get an idea of what real government is like.
And also think who you guys are representing. You're mostly representing yourself, your own thoughts, your beliefs, whereas in a real Congress, you'll be representing both that and the beliefs and the area that you're representing. So it could be a certain group of people, a certain demographic, a certain area that might benefit because of this bill. And more of those thoughts may go into you making your decision versus kind of what you personally think in that case as well.
Yeah, you're voting for your constituency. You're voting for re-election. You would be voting for money. There's a lot of influence for positions in your party. So there's a lot of things to consider that our congresspeople and our state house representatives have to consider when they vote. So that's another aspect to kind of compare our simulation to the real thing. I think just maybe an overview of what we're going to do in class the rest of the week and for tomorrow.
So,
you post a reflection yet or not?
No.
All right. Well, my classes did it. Mr. Barrett post. We're having you guys do a reflection in class tomorrow and kind of discuss and debrief what we're talking about. We've talked about so far in here and kind of how they went, and also do a reflection document for my class. It's already posted for you guys. If you want to start early, you can. And I'll talk about it in class before you via study hall today. But it's kind of a chance for you guys to reflect on all the experiences you had here, kind of think about how discourse went, how you thought your personal performance was in terms of, did you debate, did you write speeches, what did you kind of do to feel to get involved in the situation, how did you become an informed voter, and really work on and kind of show us all the skills that we've worked on over the course of this term, and how to become that citizen who's going to make those informed decisions.
We will also do a in-class, like whole class debrief tomorrow. So be thinking about what went well today and yesterday, what could be improved on in the future, what were some instances of positive and negative civil discourse, how does that maybe compare to the real world? How did our discourse in full session compare to what we are seeing on TV, compared to what we see at the Thanksgiving table when we see our family members debating with each other about politics? Think about that, because usually, as Moose said on day one here, we tend to do a pretty good job overall. That does not mean we're perfect. There were definitely breakdowns in civil discourse. But I want you to think about that and try to apply that to the world when you leave here.
And also think about, as I said before, we'll do our veto overturn after that and look at kind of continue that debate. We may discuss some of the, as we're both our classes are doing some stuff with the rights, your Bill of Rights 2, right, you're doing. We discuss some of the constitutionality of the laws that we did pass and see if they would be challenged or not possible in the court, and maybe do a little be the judge on those as well. Again, kind of fulfill the whole process we looked at in terms of how an idea goes to become a law.
With that, I think there's a few people that we need to give a round of applause to for all the work that they did. Let's start off with Mr. Dingman, who's allowing us to use this and get this prepared for us.
Give a big hand, everybody. Let's also give a big hand to all of our elected and appointed leadership who put a lot of extra time into making sure that this could run well. Mr. Brager, I love this event because we sit back and just kind of watch, and it's all you guys that are running it. And so for all of our assistant whips, our floor leaders, our party whips, our speaker, parliamentarian, and our clerks, let's give them a big hand for all the work they put in to make this whole thing happen too.
Also, just in general, all of you for participating in one way or another. I heard a lot of people giving speeches on behalf of other students, and that's great. We heard people's opinions and people's beliefs and facts that they've researched that we wouldn't have heard without those people being willing to read those. So give yourselves a round of applause as well.
And I think also for those who are writing speeches as well, for taking the time to write speeches and even have them read, we're in a new world where not everything has to be verbal communication, right? In terms of social media and all that kind of stuff, we have a chance to write and express our beliefs that way. So if you guys are writing extra speeches and putting those things together, also give yourselves a big hand as well. So we do need your bill books for a grade. It's 50 points for my class. I know what it's for you, but same thing. If you could please, Mr. Brager's bill books.
Make sure your name's on it.
Yeah, put your name on your bill book first of all. All of my bill books can come over here on this side, a nice big stack. Mr. Brager's bill books over here, a nice big stack. Also, please check your rows. Make sure everything is picked up. No paper, no pens, no pencils, no snacks, no water bottles, no food, no garbage. That we keep using this space that Ms. Dingman so graciously helps us use and take care of.
I move to adjourn. Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you in a little bit.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you guys. Right here. I'm right here.